I mean, we live in times where a world leader can actually say you can gulp down Lysol, or is it, I'm not sure what that was, you can gulp down Lysol to kill COVID-19, right? So
Yes.
in really, really strange times, I think, and I'm not sure if it's that in itself is a pandemic, but bizarre occurrences have happened here in the Philippines also. And there have been just too many pronouncements of threats about the shutdown of ABS-CBN, notwithstanding the Senate inquiry and all the other memorandums. But no, I'm not surprised. And that's a sad, sad thing.
What does this mean for us? What does this, well, I guess that's first. What does this mean for journalists?
Well, for journalists, that to me is a big question. I'd like to tread lightly because, as you know, I mean, the journalist in me is like half comatose ever since I married a politician and I now have 2 kids. So I've been able to like successfully shut my mouth all these years, except today. So I'm on Twitter, but these are unusual times. I think there's a journalist in everyone. And that part of us, Maria, we can never shut off, right? A big part of us can still say what's left from right, up and down. And it's as simple as that. It's black and white. And I hope you don't mind me indulging in saying that I still remember so vividly the days of my early 20s when democracy and freedom of the press had just been restored in 1986, 30-something years ago, after the EDSA revolution. And that was really a glorious, glorious time for journalism, if you remember. From the days of being a censored reporter, just of the weather though, of the Marcos-run government channel, where I used to work, it was a glaring contrast when we came back with that freedom restored. And a show like Hoy Gising would be born, wherein a 25-year or 20-something-year-old can actually call out to President Aquino and say, you're not doing your job right. And this is the same woman who restored that freedom of the press with no fear of repercussion. Walang natatakot nun, walang gantihan. We can all say what we needed to say as the voice of the people restored. And of course, in the testing of the limits of those powers, Maria, you commit infractions. I've gotten myself into one trouble or another, but the system itself corrects itself. The democratic system corrects itself. And I just really have to say, and I don't want to be pointing fingers. I mean, I may also be guilty of it, but the landscape today to me is just unrecognizable. It's so, so far from those days when we can go on air and tell the president exactly what we thought of him or her at that time. So I don't want to say more because I don't want to be pontificating. All I'm saying is we get what we deserve. And my reaction is a question. My reaction is a question. It's like, yeah, okay, we're waiting for what the courts are going to say, but really, it didn't really have to get there. And it now really all depends on how the off, for, and by the people, including the journalists, will respond to what's happening today.
No, I agree with you there. And of course, how crazy, right? I've been arrested, not once, but twice. So these are definitely crazy times.
Yeah, I really don't. How are the harassments coming along, by the way?
There's a silver lining. You know, I was supposed to have gotten a verdict on the cyber libel case April 3rd, then it was postponed to April 24th, and now it's indefinitely postponed. I'm hoping that this means that the judiciary can act in a more independent manner, but good God, everything is out the window with this move against ABS-CBN. The last time that ABS-CBN shut down, went black on air, was in the 70s, and it was followed by 21 years of a dictatorship, right? What does that mean? Now, if you put it in that context, that this was followed by a dictatorship, what's ahead? What is this moment? How do we capture this moment? What is at risk for us?
I would like to think that there has been some measure of progression in history, Maria. what was allowed to happen in the 70s, well, I don't know if I'm being naive about it. I mean, we're in 2020. I mean, we've been to the moon. They haven't discovered the cure for cancer, but we're probably almost near there. Certainly, maybe a vaccine for this virus. But I would imagine that that should not be so easy to happen anymore. But then the answer to that question really relies on the definition of democracy itself, of, for, and by the people. I have no doubt that President Duterte won the elections by a considerable margin, and there was no contest to that. I mean, nobody really argued, nobody debated it, and it's a pristine opportunity for him to do the right thing. Is he also testing the limits of his powers the way we journalists tested it in 1986? And is he going to learn from what could be an infraction? So I'm waiting on both what the journalists are going to do, what the people are going to do, how loud are they going to become, what the president is going to do, and how everything will come together. So the answer to that question really relies on how we respond. So to my followers, the very small clout that I have in commentary, that's what I encourage them to do. It is also what I think the president of ABS-CBN did, to tell people to speak out, and it really depends on us.
No, I agree. I agree with you.
But then, of
that
course,
one.
you know that if you let it pass, it can escalate into something else. If you give him a finger, he might want 2 or 3 or your whole arm the next time. So the testing of the limits of the powers will again depend on the majority of the people.
I noticed last night on Twitter, on on your social media accounts, you were.
Am I in trouble again?
No. Oh my God, Karina.
Every time you call me to your office, I think that you're calling me for some problem.
You're so funny. It was, to be honest, in this day and age, I think journalists had we were always at a disadvantage on social media because we held ourselves back, right? I was unshackled when I got arrested because I felt like I have firsthand knowledge of how power abused power, how the government abused power and actually violated my rights. So why should I prevent myself from speaking about it? Remember our old conversations about this?
I mean, it has to be a real experience, right? It has to be a real experience. And I think that is the most authentic.
What made you be so outspoken?
I wasn't really that outspoken. I think it's only because people are so used to me shutting up. From the days of Hoy Gising or say DZMM, where my job was really to call it out, tell it as it is, and receive it as much as I dish it out, right? And maybe they're just not used to the persona that I thought was buried 6 feet under. I thought the Bruja Corina had already been put to pasture, but then I guess there are just some things that you can't not say, especially during times when it calls for you to speak out, calls for you to lean in, to be counted, and to stand by what you really believe in. I mean, this is a really big thing. I'm foreseeing that it will be a worldwide event. I mean, if it isn't corrected immediately. I am not per se against the administration. I think some of the stuff that they do are good. I have many friends in the Duterte administration, but I think what is so clear is what's wrong and what's right in this case. I mean, we have a Senate inquiry that categorically stated a provisional authority would be given. We have a memorandum order that says, okay, all media outlets whose franchises are lapsing by April 2020 and all those within the ECQ, LAPS will be allowed to be operational until 60 days after the end of ECQ. I mean, come on. It does not take an Einstein to figure that out.
Right, right. And in this one, again, I have firsthand experience, right? It is the law, it has a veneer of legal action, but in the end, it actually goes against legal norms, right? This action is well, we called it an abomination. You know, it is it goes against the Constitution and freedom of speech, freedom of the press. I guess you know Filipinos, and you have gone through the pendulum swing from 1986, when you talked about what it was like for you, to today. I mean, you've become a force, and now we're at this point that we've never been at. What's your fearless forecast? How would you describe Filipinos today?
Today? Well, okay, before I get to that, let me just mention, just to give credit to the larger majority, because we're not the only thinkers, right? I mean, you and I probably tend to overthink things. You more than I do. I mean, I'm half comatose, as I told you. But you know, my followers, you were mentioning about the reaction to my reactions. I think there's a hunger. I think there's a hunger to be led. There's a hunger among Filipinos who care about what happens, well, first of all, to their families and loved ones, and of course to the whole community, the whole country. What happens next? ABS-CBN is it's an icon, it's an institution, 65 years in the service of the Filipino. And I'm not saying that because I was there. I'm saying that as a fact that it is the largest network in the Philippines that had served the Filipinos. I mean, how bad could they be? They should have been shut down 15 years ago or earlier. So kahit sa bangko, di ba, Maria, when you're not able to pay interest on a loan, it's not like the bank automatically shuts you down. There are mitigating conditions that will require them to reach out because lives are at stake, right? So they don't really close you down. Kabuhayan yan eh. So, okay, kabayad ng interest, bakit papasarado mo na ako agad? And that's not even to say that there was a commitment for a provisional authority. So in the same way, I think these regular thinkers are getting it right. And that's what I'm getting. I only have 1 million followers. Others have like super millions. But I can tell from the fair share of demographics among all that they get it. They get it because you just don't do that. You just don't do that. You don't do it that way. And the utter absence of goodwill lends to suspicion. And when there's smoke, there's fire. So ibig sabihin, huwag magagalit ang administrasyon sa journalist kasi yung common tao, nakukuha nila eh, naiintindihan nila, di ba? So it's not really, we are just there to really, to be their mouthpiece. So fearless forecast. Maria, who knows? My gosh, I would like to say that never again, right? But this fork in the road, if we keep missing that fork, and there have been several forks so far past years, it's like I'm getting encouraged because it seems we're going to go to the right, and then suddenly we digress. So again, we can relive those glorious days again. To me, journalism is a bit unrecognizable today from 30 years ago, but we can get there again. Not so much in such dramatic circumstances, because I think the administration still has a window to correct this. If they're talking about technicality, then okay, let the court decide. I disagree with that, by the way. But if it's in the courts, there is an opportunity to just let democracy prevail, let the right thing happen. And we don't have to get there. But henceforth, let this be a lesson to all of us that we cannot stay quiet. We can't blink an eye. And we just have to do our part because what we have is what we deserve.